How do we talk through tough issues? Welcome to Tea at Taxevity, where you get insights from insiders, our many clients and friends. I'm Pramod Sharma, your actuary at Taxevity. I help people transfer financial risks with life and health insurance. Our guest today is Trudy Pelletier. Trudy, what do you do when you're not being interviewed?
I help people talk through tough issues. My core work is working with business families who are undergoing continuity and succession planning. And those are fraught with lots of emotional and challenging issues to discuss.
And what's different about you is that right after this interview, you're heading to the airport to fly back to Calgary.
Yes, so I've been in Toronto all week at a business conference for business families. And lovely that you made time for me while I'm here in Toronto.
What communication challenges do we face?
Well, there are many. And the one that I like to focus on is listening, and that's where I'll start, partly because we don't pay enough attention to it. So statistics show that 97% of the population listens to respond, and less than 3% of us listen to understand. So that means while you're talking, I'm already thinking about what I'm going to say next. Inside of business families or people that we've worked with for a long time, we tend to see them in a patterned way, like we label people, including ourselves.
What do you mean by a patterned way?
Well, our brain creates patterns to conserve energy. So I'm going to use my dad as an example. In '09, I got present to seeing that my dad, who my dad was for me, was the bad guy. So every time I went into a conversation with my dad, I was listening to him through the filters of him being the bad guy. And it put something in the way. Mm-hmm. So when working with business families, we tend to listen to our parents or our siblings through some way that we've labeled them. And as a result, the listening levels are less than effective. So I help business families and leaders in business increase the listening levels to overcome one communication challenge.
What can we do to listen better?
So in every thought leader philosophy out there, as far back as Aristotle and current today, one of the key elements is self-awareness. So our brain has amazing capacity to see multiple perspectives, yet here's how we live. Good, bad, right, wrong, I like this, I don't like this, I like them, I don't like them. And the moment we've taken a position, we actually have created a barrier to seeing anything else. So one of the critical aspects to improving our listening is to first be aware as to what position have I taken. Like, if I labeled this as good, or have I labeled what you've said as bad? So I have awareness. And then what there is to do is to suspend that label, suspend that judgment.
Okay, first of all, it seems hard to figure out what labels we're applying because it's us, but maybe we can do that. But then how do we suspend them? Because it just seems innate that we would have these processes that we're using.
Well, you're right. And so inherent in being human is the need to be right. So we make a label, and then we actually have a driving need that most of us aren't aware about of needing to be right about that. So we only take in information that validates how we've labeled something or that filter. So again, it's just a muscle to develop inside of communication, is to see, I really need to be right about that, and park it aside and bring myself to the conversation to really hear what you're saying. So I'm aware I've labeled what you're saying is bad. I'm aware I've got the need to be right. I just park it and bring myself to the conversation. Mm-hmm. Second to that, there's I use this model called be, do, have. So the have represents the results that we produce,
okay,
the actions that we take or don't take to produce those results. And most of us look at the results we have and the things that we can do so that we could be happy or be connected or be closer. Mm-hmm. And that actually goes against the natural cycle. So the only thing that you and I and every other human being has a say over is who we are being at any given moment. And I'll give you an example. Imagine you have a difficult conversation. Let's say in business, you have a performance issue to raise with someone. or at home with your teenager who isn't abiding by the ground rules. Now, we can go into that conversation being critical, impatient, frustrated, demanding. And out of being those things, we will find ourselves doing and saying certain things and producing a certain outcome. We could also go into that same conversation with that same teenager or that same employee being direct, compassionate, curious, interested. And out of being that, we will find ourselves doing and saying completely different things and producing a different outcome. So what there is to do is to pay attention to who am I being right now.
What do you mean by who am I being right now?
So when we have a communication breakdown with another person, again, whether it be with our parent or our teenager or someone in business, we typically tend to blame them. So when I have a message I want you to receive and it doesn't land over there with you, the muscle to develop is looking at who was I being in my communication such that my message didn't land. Like maybe I was being edgy or sarcastic or demanding. And that's what had you get defensive in a way that you couldn't hear what I had to say. So the way that we show up, the energy that we're in, who we are being has a real impact on our communication.
What else threatens good communication?
Well, most of us have a history of some kind of failed conversations, where we've created a reaction of talk to the hand, or we've all had the experience of talking to a brick wall, or perhaps even for ourselves having the experience of a temper tantrum as a 3-year-old. And all of those impact the health of a relationship, impact the future of the conversation, a business, a relationship. However, research shows that the missing conversation is the biggest threat to the health of a relationship, to the success of a business, and to the harmony in a business family.
What do you mean by a missing conversation?
It's the things that we won't talk about, or it's the things that we've tried to talk about and we haven't been able to move the needle in the right direction, and so we give up talking about it. So there's a story of an alcoholic father who one evening drives his car home right through the bay window and into the dining room.
Ooh.
And the very next morning, mom gets up, kids get up, walk through the dining room in which the Oldsmobile is sitting in, goes to the kitchen table, has breakfast, and nobody mentions that there's an Oldsmobile in the dining room. We would call that a missing conversation.
Okay.
So the things that aren't said fester between people. It becomes larger and larger. So the things that we either consider an undiscussable. So as an example, in the business families I work with, talking about the estate plan, as an example, is a missing conversation. Mom and dad don't want to tell their kids what the plans are for fear of upsetting someone or dealing with conflict or having emotional outbursts. Those are missing conversations that really impact the health of relationships. Because what happens is, if you and I have something between us, both of us start to become thwarted and muted and careful in a way that distance is produced.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. What's your main message for people watching today?
Listen better. Be in the conversation, be available, be generous with the people that you're listening, and just develop the habit of suspending, parking your judgments, your labels, your assumptions, and be present with them.
What's the best way for people to reach you?
So my website is simplymore.ca. My email is Trudy with a Y, Trudy at simplymore.ca. And my cell phone is on my website.
Thanks very much for dropping by.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate being here.
Thanks for joining us for Tea at Taxevity. The Taxevity Insurance Advisory helps you understand insurance and bridges gaps in your coverage. There's no premium for peace of mind. How healthy is your insurance?